Hi, everybody, and welcome to our third class of Foundations of Java. Okay, so first we're gonna start off with a simple review of what we did in prior lessons. And to do that, we're gonna do a Kahoot, which I believe I've linked somewhere right here. Remember what we did about arithmetic last time? Remember that plus plus is a shorthand for something in Java. Okay, so remember that plus plus is just a shorthand for adding 1 to the previous value. So in this case, it would be 21. Remember, like last time, like plus plus means you add 1, minus minus means you subtract 1. So 20 minus 1 would be 19. I think there might be a problem with this Kahoot, but the answer is 19. Okay, so remember how in Java, when you have two integers, and you're dividing them, what Java does is it cuts off the remainder. So the answer would be 8. Now, this one's a bit different from the last question. Instead of 44 divided by 5, we have 44.0 divided by 5. Right, you guys all got it, right? Because 44.0 is a double, which means a number with decimal places. It will output a number with decimal places. So it won't cut off the remainder, and we'll get 8.8. Now, here's a good question. What is this percent sign for? Right, these are both correct. It's used for modulus, which is basically the remainder of integer division. Okay, next question. Now we're going to use the modulus. Okay, perfect. So none of you fell for this one, which is 6.6, 6.0, and 6 are basically the same thing. But remember, it's the remainder of integer divisions, and all of these numbers are ints. So an int is the output. This one's also incredibly similar. So you guys should all get it. Okay, yeah. 45 divided by 8 is 5 remainder 5. And that would just give you 5. Here's some more modulus. Right, so remember, when you have 100,000 divided by 1, it's always divisible because it's 1. So your remainder, you will have no remainder, so it's 0. Oh, right. Take a look at this. We have 100,000 and we have 500,000. And since this number is obviously bigger than this one, when you divide this by this, you would get 0, remainder 100,000. All right, last question. Right, this time the two numbers are flipped, and 500,000 is greater than 100,000, and they are divisible. So you get no remainder. And all of that modulus practice was for our lesson today, which would be using modulus in. So we can close that out. And let's get on to our lesson. So today's lesson is on conditionals. So in conditionals, it just means there is a condition. And this condition, it can either be true or false. And there's nothing in between. Nothing can be both true and false. So let's take a look at some numerical conditions. We have equals equals, and we have this exclamation point and equals. What this basically means is that your testing is this equal to that, and it won't change the value of a variable. Like if you were saying, like you have a variable a, which is an int, and you do a equals this, that's overriding the variable. But if you put 2 equal signs, it just checks whether it's the same. So let's see that in action, right? So we have this piece of code. So equals equals. It checks if a variable is equal to another number, right? We have int I, say it's 4, right? And if we write I, if we try to check if I equals 4, it's true. But if we say 3 is equal to 4, that's false, right? We could check a variable and we can check another number. It can also check if a variable is equal to another variable. So let's say we have A and we have B. Are they equal? Yes, that's true. And we also have the less than and less than or equal to and greater than or greater than or equal to. It's basically the same thing, checking, is this number less than that number? It's greater than that number? And remember, when you want to do less than or equal to or greater than or equal to, the equal sign has to be after the less than or greater than. So let's take a look at if statements. This is where we're going to use our conditionals, right? We're going to have a statement that says if this is true, whatever happens, whatever in the if statement will happen. If this if statement is not true, if this conditional is not true, then the whole thing just won't run. It'll be skipped over. So to write an if statement, first we have the word if, all lowercase. It will then we have something in parentheses, and that will be the condition, which you will be checking whether it's true or not. In this case, I just wrote 2 is less than 3, which is true, which means that this inside these curly braces will print, right? So it will print true, which I have printed. Okay, and other than if statements, we have else if and else statements. So if the if conditional is true, then it will run. But if this if statement isn't true and it won't run, you can also add something after called else if. And if else if is true, then that will run. And if it's not true, it won't run. Similar to if statements, but it can only be put after an if statement. And if the if statement is true and you have an else statement after, then the else statement won't run if the if is true. Otherwise, you have else. And if all of the statements before the else statements are false, it will run the else. So that's a bit of information that I just gave you, but you might not be sure how it really works when you see it in a piece of code. So let's write this divisibility example together. Right, our goal is to write a program that determines if, keyword if, a number is divisible by 5. We're going to use user input for an int, we're going to use arithmetic, and we're going to use these if, and else statements. I already set up some skeleton code for myself for this. Now, remember when you want to do user input, you have this import at the top, import java.util.scanner. That has to be before this class, whatever your class is named. And inside, like the public static void, you're going to put this, the scanner input equals new scanner system.in. So here, I'm going to start my program here. I also have input.close, which will close the input after, just to keep everything in its nice little bubble, but it's not necessary. I just have it there. So let's take a look at this again. We want to see if we could write a program that determines if a number is divisible by 5, right? So we want the user to input a number. To do that, we just declare a variable that says int, we're going to say number, and it's going to be equal to input.next, and since it's an int with a capital I, don't forget the parentheses, your semicolon, right? But remember, before that, if you run the program, all it's going to do is come up with this blinking cursor. It tells us to type something in. So before that, it's better to write something so the user knows what they're trying to input, right? So let's do system.out.print. Let's say enter a number, something simple, just like that. Right, so when I run this, it's just going to give me enter a number, and I'm going to enter number 8. Once I press enter, it doesn't do anything because I don't have anything after that, but that's where we're going to put it next. So we want to see if this number is divisible by 5, right? So let's put it in an if statement. If the parentheses, let's say number, and remember, to see if it's divisible by 5, the modulus of the number better be 0. So we do number, the percent sign, and we do %5, so the number divided by 5, and we want it to be equal to 0 to check if it's equal to 0. So we use our equals equals, right? Equals equals 0. And then you put these curly braces, which is you do shift square bracket, and that's what it is. Press enter. And we want to say if our number is divisible by 5, we'll print out system.out.print. Your number is divisible by 5. Right? But what if the number isn't divisible by 5, right? We could do an else if statement, but if we want to do an else if statement, I would have to type out like number %5 does not equal 0. Remember that the exclamation point before the equal sign means that it does not equal. But what I could just simply do, right? Because a number is equal to this, either divisible by 5 or it's not divisible by 5. So I could just write an else statement. I'll do else system.out.print. Your number is not divisible by 5. I believe I spelled divisible wrong here. But that's pretty much it. Let's take a look. We've met all the requirements. We used user input for the int. We used arithmetic with the modulus. And we used the if-else statements. Right? Our run should look like this. Enter a number or this. Oh, right. We can also do this thing that says instead of just saying your number is not divisible by 5, and we can replace your number by your variable number and use concatenation to put it all together. So let's remove your number and just add number plus. Right, let's print that out and see what happens. Right, we get enter a number. I'm just gonna pick a random number. Let's say 190. And then it runs code and checks, and yes, 190 is divisible by 5. See if it works if the number isn't divisible by 5. Okay, 66 is not divisible by 5. And there it goes. It just prints out like that. So your conditional right here, your condition, and then your if statement right there. Remember that you have to have these parentheses open and closed around your if statement for it to work. And for an else statement, you don't need it because, I mean, if this one isn't true, it'll just run this. Okay, perfect. So let's move on. Let's play a little bit. What's the output with these new conditions and if statements? Okay, here's our first question. We have if 4 is less than 3, system.out.print less than 3. Else if 4 equals 3, print out equals to 3. Else print out greater than 3. What will it print out? Okay, right? So we know that 4 is not less than 3. We know that 4 is not equal to 3. And since both these are false, the else statement will run and it'll print out greater than 3. So for those who responded greater than 3, you're right. Okay, next question. We have a variable named I, which is an int, and it's equal to 6. This is similar to our divisible by 5 code, but instead it asked divisible by 2 or divisible by 3. Right, if we take a look, both of these are actually if statements. So it doesn't depend on if this one doesn't depend on if this one is false or not. It will just run if this is true. And yes, as 6, it is divisible by both 2 and 3. So it will print out both. Okay, so I know that there wasn't much of a lecture, right? If statements, they're not too difficult to understand and you'll use them quite a lot in any piece of code that you'll write later on. So I'm just going to give you guys a little bit of practice on it, which you can figure out for yourselves, or if you need some help, just invite me to collaborate on your replets and I'll go in and help. So the first one is just a simple if, else project, right? Your goal is to print out something based on somebody's age. So you're gonna ask someone to input if they are 20 years or older, print out you're old. If they're between 13 and 19, print out you're a teenager. Otherwise, print out you're young. Now, the numbers don't have to be exactly the same. You don't have to use 20. You don't have to use like 13 and 19. And you can change what it says when these things are run. But in my sample run, if you do it exactly like me, your code should look like this afterwards. How old are you? If someone types in 15, and it should say you are a teenager. So if you guys have forgotten how to use Replit, so remember when you want to make a new Replit, just press create and just use your template as Java, give it whatever name you want, and create it. And in order to invite me to it, just press invite. And my username is Sophia Jiang 3, or you could just type in my email. Remember, here's what you guys did for the divisibility example. And I'm just going to put my screen share on the criteria for this project. And you guys can get started. Some of you have finished your codes for this project. Some of you are still working, but I'm just going to show you guys what I have because most of you are actually changing around some of the numbers and some of the criteria for your conditions. So I'm just going to show you what I have. Okay, so I have my imports and my scanner. And I just said very quickly, system.out.print, how old are you? And I made a variable called age, and I made it as a user input. Next, my first condition was if age is greater than or equal to 20, I will print out you're old. So remember, we haven't talked about it yet, but we probably will next lesson. For now, just keep your conditions to one condition. So if you want to test if age is greater than or equal to 20, or your age is greater than 12, I want you to separate it into if and else if. For now, we can talk about that next class, but let's just keep it simple. So if age is greater than or equal to 20, it will print out you're old. And if this isn't true, then I will go here. And if age is greater than 12, you'll be a teenager. And I know here that it says that you want it to be between 13 and 19, right? But just simply because my variable age is an int, if I say it's greater than 12, well, the first integer greater than 12 is 13. And the last integer that's less than 20, and not equal to 20 would be 19. So that could be the perfect range between 13 and 19. And lastly, I have else. If you're not older than 20, if you're not older than 12, then you're young. And of course, this goes for everything. I mean, if you have an age that's like 1,000 years old, right, it would still fit in to you're old. And because we haven't done anything much, maybe the user inputted a negative number, right? Let's give that a try, right? Maybe I wasn't even born yet. Let's say I'm negative 100 years old. It will still say you're young because negative 100, not greater than 20, not greater than 12, so you're young. You guys have another project. For the last few minutes, I'll talk about the car rental project and you guys can get started. This is a big project, so if you don't get it finished within the next minutes, it's fine, and you can work on it on your own until our next class, which we'll go over. So for this one, our goal is given two car companies, you have to determine which one you get a better price for renting a car for 1 day. So what you want to use for this project is you're going to use user input, and you want variables for this user input, such as the name, the rate per day, how much you're paying per day for the car, the additional rate per mile, and the mileage. Right? So this does sound a bit confusing because with all of the variables. So we're gonna have to just take a look at the sample run, right? So we asked, what is the name of the first company? And I call this company Better Cars, right? What is the price to rent the vehicle per day? I said $30. What is the price per mile? I said $3. I don't know if these prices are reasonable or not, just made up numbers. And what is the name of the second company? We're calling this Sophia's Rentals. And I might have a bit of a problem competing with Better Cars since, I don't know, I think they might have the better company name, but Sophia's Rentals, right? We do charge $45 to rent the vehicle per day, but it's only $2 per mile, right? And then afterwards, you have to ask the user, how many miles do you plan to drive, right? Let's say we're driving 100 miles. So what you want to do is you want to calculate how much money it would take, how much money you would need to pay Better Cars and to pay Sophia's Rentals, depending on that. So for Better Cars, remember that they charge 30 per day. So it would be 30 plus 3 times the number of miles driven. And the same thing for Sophia's Rentals. And turns out, wow, Sophia's Rentals actually saves you money on this. And then for the last one, just print out whichever variable is cheaper. Okay, so you guys get started on that. Okay, it does so happen that we reached the end of our class time for today. Some of you are getting a really great start on the car rental project. So, but if you have any questions regarding this, don't hesitate to email me. Just quickly send me an email, and don't forget to follow our socials on YouTube. We're One Word Anchor, and the first edited video for our first class is on our YouTube. And here is our business email, I would say. So I did share the slides in the chat, but if you want them and didn't manage to catch them quite yet, just send me an email for them too. And that's it for today. You guys did a great job. And you guys really caught on to if statements quickly. So good job to all of you. Bye. See you guys next week.